Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Digital Empathy Lounge, brought to you by Anthrolytics. The Digital Empathy Lounge is a podcast series that's exploring the best and next practices in experience management, and especially what those experiences should look and feel like. Today, I'm in conversation with Rali Andreeva, who is a customer behavior and loyalty expert. Hello, Rali.
Hello, Peter. Greetings from New Zealand.
It's a pleasure to have you on board. So, Rali, before we begin, could you tell us all a little bit more about yourself and what you're passionate about?
My experience is in bringing together the power of data and deep understanding of customer behavior to drive and unlock value for customers and businesses. I started my career as an analyst, and I have had the opportunity to work in FMCG and retail, mostly in marketing, loyalty, and the customer data areas. Recently, I led one of the largest programs in New Zealand, loyalty programs in New Zealand, OneCard. I'm passionate about all things privacy and data ethics, and I'm an advocate for transparency and customers having control over all of their data. It's really good to talk to you today, Peter.
No, it's a pleasure to have you, Rali, as I said. And yes, I know that as we're speaking, you're entering summer in New Zealand. We're just entering autumn here in the UK. Anyway, now let's just pry into a couple of those things, because I found that a couple of things you said were quite interesting. But there's a lot of discussion about data privacy and use, especially in providing tailored experiences. But you and I have discussed the difference between personalization and customization. Perhaps you could take a moment or two and just explain your thoughts on those. What's the difference between the two? Aren't they the same thing, personalization and customization?
It is really interesting, Peter. It is acknowledged that personalization can unlock customer value and drive commercial outcomes. Personalization is at the heart of most of the business strategies nowadays, with a lot of focus on technology, automating customer journeys and data algorithms. And usually personalization is where we use algorithms to customize the journeys and almost nudge customers what experience and what services they need to experience. What I'm really interested in is how we can move from personalization to customization. And this is a way for customers to make choices and changes to the services and the products. It's a customer-led experience where privacy, transparency, and control is actually part of the journey, and customers actually in control of what they want to experience instead of algorithms and the businesses actually curating the experience for the customers.
I think that's such an important thing, isn't it, really, that the customer is in the driving seat of the experience that they receive. Too many businesses that I think we've both encountered tend to think inside out. They assume they know what the customer wants and the best way to deliver that. And in many cases, they do a fairly good job of that. But in a world where we're more exposed to one-to-one experiences and the experience management should be focused around the customer, giving that customer the choice and the tools to customize it is really important. Now, a lot of organizations do deliver a personalized experience of some form. But one of the things you've been talking to me about, and that I hadn't really come across before, was something called a personalized ecosystem. So what's a personalized ecosystem versus a personalized experience?
This is something I have been reflecting a lot on. Each organization designs experiences based on the data available and the goals they want to achieve. So just reflect on department store may curate the experience for clothes and shoes. Grocery retail will do something completely different. Often these experiences are not connected and represent a small part of my life. From one side, personalization will make my life really easy when I want to buy new clothes. However, on the other hand, just consider how many times I need to provide consent, provide my data, understand and figure out how things work. And sometimes actually different data algorithms may provide different recommendations for similar experiences as products that I want. So it could be actually quite confusing. A lot of organizations are creating an ecosystem of experiences and products that are fully integrated. And it's almost like a personal life experience. China is way ahead of it with the mega apps and mega ecosystems. Alibaba and Google are the big connectors. This is probably much better from customer experience point of view. There's a simplest one way for customers to engage. However, when it comes to data, is a lot more complex because we share data with an ecosystems and a lot of brands and connectors will have access to this data. Also, it's important to talk about brands. How do you build a brand trust within an ecosystem when the relationship with the customer is actually facilitated by the connectors in the ecosystem? Something to really think about.
Yeah, thank you. And that is an interesting point because of some of the other moves that are going on around the world. So, as we speak, there's a lot of discussion going on about the demise of third-party cookies. So how do we get those experiences brought together? And as ecosystems form, what we see are organizations beginning to share second-party data. So in order to make that overall experience work, then those partners are sharing data with each other, which does bring you back to your point about privacy and giving people access. And one of the things I think we'll have to talk about as a society is, to whom am I giving access to my data? Am I giving it to a brand? Am I giving it to, as you say, one of these mega platforms that can then join all of this up for me? Which is quite interesting because most brands tend to think of customer journeys as rather linear. They have a start and a stop, most of which is within the brand experience. But when, of course, you talk about an ecosystem, then we're really talking about an experience landscape where the customer, the consumer, is moving between different providers, different parties, and getting one thing from one party and another thing from another party, which makes sense to them and helps their life move forward, but is a more complicated picture. Now, as people move through those landscapes, we also do that not just as single individuals with a single relationship with a brand or an organization, but as we saw through the pandemic, we're actually far more interconnected and interdependent than we thought. So I'd like to ask you this. When we think about personalization and the relationships between individuals and organizations, isn't there also a wider context to this? What would be the impact of this on communities and wider society?
Definitely there's an impact on communities. So personalization is a great way to provide value at individual level. However, we as humans no longer live in shared reality. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to debate different points of view and to discover or learn in a common way. Probably we're really missing opportunity here, and this has an impact on the communities and the societies. Simply because the personalization forces us to experience what we like at a point of time and in the way organization actually wants us to see information and products. I believe that senior leaders, academic, executive teams, all of us, we have moral responsibilities to consider the social impact when it comes to personalization. Just reflect, you mentioned COVID, just reflect on COVID. Somebody who different people who experience different news feeds when it comes to COVID. People who want to actually get vaccination and are interested in this in the news, they will get more and more information. In people who actually don't want to get vaccinated, they will get more and more information why vaccines are actually not good or have side effects. Again, this has an impact on the debate, has an impact on the customer knowledge, and definitely has an impact on communities as well. For me personally, this is really important, especially now when we're moving into the world of biometrics. And very soon, no longer I don't need to share my name and date of birth to be identifiable. So biometrics are going to completely change the way data is used and the way customers actually experience product and services. And all of us, as I say, have moral responsibilities, not just to think about the individual experience, but how we're changing the communities in our society.
Thanks, Rally. And that's, again, some interesting points. So let's see if I can just tell you a little bit about what I'm hearing from what you've been saying. So, first we talked a little bit about the difference between personalization and customization. And I think for me, one of the defining differences is that often personalization is a function of how the organization has designed the experience, where customization is actually about how the customer is designing the experience that fits them. And then we talked a little bit more about a personalized ecosystem, these mega platforms, which can bring together different parties, different brands and organizations to deliver an overall experience, which has the advantage of things like convenience for me as a consumer. So if I'm looking at something like, I don't know, I'm planning a journey, then I could talk to multiple partners as a whole point. So I can look at how do I make my travel arrangements, my pickups and transfers, where I might stay, and so on. So that based around what I need, bringing together multiple parties is interesting. But then, as you say, we put that into the context of society. And here we're going to start getting into some of those interesting challenges. So we get into trust. And I think that all of us would recognize, and the research is certainly very clear, that since the 1970s, trust in established institutions has been really dramatically falling. We don't look to those traditional sources of information as much as we used to. Now we go out to alternative sources of information and insight. And you raised the one about vaccination. People don't trust as much governments or doctors. They're looking at those other important influences. And some of those are clearly going to be brands. So it's going to be reliant on a brand to actually be trusted, which is firstly, they have to be saying to do the things, we're going to act in an ethical, moral and responsible way. And then secondly, they have to deliver on that. So I'd just like to ask you just one little thing on the back of that. The role of trust and privacy clearly go together. I just wonder whether you have any thoughts about what the future might look for that. You've talked already about the use of biometrics to uniquely identify me, but are there other things that are going through your mind thinking about this world of privacy and data and access and use and personalization in the future?
Well, for me, privacy and data ethics should be part of the brand identity. Needs to the brand to have a credible voice, to be authentic, and to build the relationship with customers. They really need to take into consideration how data are used, what's the experience, and how customers actually can make choice and control. This is a very, very new field for all of us, and we're learning every day. However, more we anchor into the ethical use of data and understand customer behavior, better relationship, more meaningful relationship we're going to develop with our customers. So yes, really, really important for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Rali. And it is. I think we're going to get into ever more powerful machines, things like AI being under the control of some of these big platforms, and more increasingly under the control of individual brands and organizations. And of course, they don't have inbuilt ethics. In fact, we're going to have to figure out what human ethics are before we can actually put them into machines. Nonetheless, I'm very optimistic about what the future may hold. Anyway, Rali, thank you so much for sharing that. That actually brings us to the end of this episode of the Digital Empathy Lounge. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to be a guest on the Digital Empathy Lounge, then please check out the comments. You'll find a link there to follow, to get in touch and put forward your name. I'd be delighted to hear from you. But other than that, all that really remains for me to say thank you again, Rali. That was a really interesting insight.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go away and think about that a little bit more. And to everybody else, thanks for watching and listening. Until the next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.